I missed it. Yeah. Amita, is that okay that if we go online, we record it and all this 30 minutes interaction and have it as a YouTube one? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's start. Good morning, everyone. Let's on behalf of our global politics course, let's welcome Professor Amita Batra one more time. She was kind enough to speak to us a few weeks before on COVID and the global order. Amita, you were the one who introduced us to the COVID recovery curves. You talked about the U curve, V curve, and W curve. And recently that we have come across this K curve. So I thought, it would be useful for me and my scholars to have a quick interaction with you on what is this K curve recovery that we are talking about. We have a few questions. We'll be grateful if you could respond to some of
Yeah,
our.
yeah.
Thank you, Amita, for joining us. The primary question is, what is this K curve suddenly? How did it come into, when you spoke to us 3 weeks before, we were looking at V and W and L curves. Where does this K curve recovery comes in? And what does it mean for the other curves, other recovery that you were talking about, the U and the V and W? So let me start with this question to you, Amita.
Okay, I think the very first thing that we have here, when we talk about the K curve, it's important to realize that the K curve is not a theoretical concept. It's not like that is basically something that has been brought in as far as the journalistic term is concerned. It's more in that sense, which has appeared in the context of the pandemic because of the nature of developments that we have seen. Traditionally speaking, we have, as I think I had talked about last time, we talk about the V curve, where you have a dip and you quickly recover, or you have a W, where you dip, you recover, and then you dip again to recover back to the original. There is also the L curve, I think, which I had talked about last time, where the dip is very prolonged. You cannot immediately see, that there is going to be a recovery. So as far as, these are concerned, or also the U-shaped curve, where there is a dip, the dip extends for a certain time period, but it's not prolonged enough, and you do recover back to the original. In this case, in the pandemic, what has been seen is a very differentiated kind of, developments or differentiated kind of impact that has been on the economy within countries and across countries. That is, it's differentiated, that we've not been kind of looking at either everybody getting impacted in terms of fallen incomes, or everybody experiencing a similar kind of rise or fall or dip in their income. What we are looking at in the pandemic, or as a consequence of the pandemic, has been basically that we've seen some countries do better than the other countries. We've seen within countries some people do better than the others, some who've really gone from income to no income at all, employment to lack of employment, and some who've actually amassed wealth. We've seen some components of the economy do well. For example, the stock market, if you look at that, is doing really well. There is a lot of talk about whether the stock market is in consonance with what is happening in the real sector, what is happening in the market otherwise. The financial and real sector is not necessarily in consonance with each other. And then there is also, across sectors, within an economy, across sectors, if we look at, then we see some sectors doing very well. E-commerce, for example, is doing very well. But there are sectors, that are completely, for example, tourism. Developing now, in some cases, domestic travel, etc. But right from the beginning, we've seen tourism to fall because of travel shutdowns. So travel, tourism, entertainment, we've seen complete lockdowns as far as these sectors are concerned. So given this differentiated impact, economic impact of the pandemic on and across countries, you see, there is the emergence of this K curve. If you look at the shape of the K, you've got the straight line, you've got one curve, one line going up, some people, some communities, some sectors going up and some dipping, so some communities, some sectors, the real sector, in that case, some countries having a dip, so that's what, and that's how the term K curve really originates, or that's what it really supposed to signify, that there is a differentiated impact of the pandemic on and across and within countries.
Yeah. No, again, keeping the K letter as a starting point, is the upward trend and the downward trend, are they directly proportional? Meaning that you are going to rise at a particular pace and towards a particular number, whereas the downfall, will it be the same, or will it the letter will take a different? Will it be a slow downfall or a faster fall? Will it be directly proportional? How do we see that?
As far as the K curve is concerned, I mean, in terms of proportions of recovery or otherwise, there isn't any, I mean, we're not really looking at whether, what's the rate of decline or what's the rate of increase as far as, the rise is concerned. So the proportions or the percentages or the share of the economy that's part of one, not part of the other, this is not defining proportions, this is basically defining, the nature of developments that are taking, the nature of economic impact, I would say, that's happening across and within countries. That's about it. Even when we talk about the L or the U or the V, we are not really talking about proportions of the economy, that would experience that kind of a change, or that's basically in terms of timing. That is, you have a dip for a prolonged period when it's L curve, you have a dip for a shorter period, when it is U curve, and you have just a dip, and a quick rise, when it's a V curve. So it's both. So it's more in terms of the timing as far as dip and recovery is concerned. In case of K, it is more in terms of giving you an idea of the nature of recovery or the nature of impact, which we are saying is differentiated. But it's not in terms of proportions. We are not really saying that the rising line is shorter than the dipping line, or the rising line, is more, it's longer than the dipping line. That's not there. We don't have that kind of a distinction. As I said, must remember that you do not really have, this is not really a theoretical concept, It's more journalistic. It's more something that's coming out of or emerged out of what has been seen happening over time, in terms of the pandemic. Remember that this K curve has occurred or has appeared only in recent times. It's not like right from the beginning we had the K curve. We were originally talking about V's, U's, and W's. And if you look at, I mean, if you kind of listen to our own chief economic advisor, he's still talking about a V-shaped recovery rather than, even a K-shaped recovery. So K is more in terms of giving you the picture as far as the nature of recovery is concerned.
We get it. Harini, please.
Ma'am, when we're talking about the K-shaped recovery, is it a very higher economy concept where there is a lot of diverse sectors within their economy? Also, what if a country is a manufacturing? I mean, what if, say, we take the example of China, it is largely a manufacturing economy and it does not depend on hospitality or tourism or entertainment income. So in cases like this, can we apply the K curve to understand probably production consumption? How does it work?
It doesn't have really much to do with individual. I cannot say that this will not apply to China, because remember that as far as sectors are concerned, in terms of the examples that I'm giving you, for example, travel and tourism. Travel and tourism, because of border closures to begin with, were shut for all economies, and they continue to be shut for many economies. I mean, even in case of China, where China as one of the ones to recover. It's interesting to see that this is where, or that's where the pandemic originated. And that's where the pandemic has also subsided. It's the first one to have recovered to positive growth, actually. We're actually going to look at positive growth in case of China, which is not so in many other economies, So in that sense, China may be distinct, But otherwise, if we say that China is distinct, or K will not apply, no, because K is, as I said, differentiated within economies. So even as far as China is concerned, it is world over. If we look at, it is e-commerce within sectors, that has developed more than, ordinary shopping, that's happening. It's all in terms of online. It's basically telecom online that would have taken to begin with. For example, telecom took a hit because Hubei was where telecom supply chains were concentrated. So that was the region where it, or the province where it originated, and we were expecting it to go down. Over time, because more and more people have started to stay home, sectors like office machinery have developed. Everybody is buying a computer. Everybody needs these kinds of devices, office machinery at home. So there is greater purchase. So some sectors have actually picked up, others have not. But to say that China is not dependent upon, for example, entertainment and so on, I don't think so. If I mean, if I may say so, travel is a huge component of Chinese economy. And Chinese travel as such is also a huge component of the global economy. Chinese travelers, that's the maximum contribution to global travel, and global tourism. China makes the maximum contribution. So in that sense, I mean, as far as China is concerned, it's recovered first. The K may not be so apparent because China is doing a lot of public spending. There's a lot of expenditure that's being done by the state. It's not so much private spending that's coming up. So it's not really going to be in terms of entertainment that people are spending on, but there's a lot of public investment that's happening by the government, in terms of infrastructure build-up, for example. So there's a lot of that component that's contributing to Chinese recovery. But I will not say that K is not applicable globally, because certain sectors have been globally impacted. They're there across the world. You can't deny the fact that everybody has, I mean, uh, if we see, you kind of probably have seen pictures of aeroplanes and hangars parked, across the world, different airports. I think the Changi Airport at Singapore, which is one of the most busiest airports, in the world. There were pictures the other day that I saw last week, which is to say how deserted it is, and it's not going to come back to its pre-pandemic level anytime soon. So these are all indicators of how some sectors have become more and more impacted, and will continue to be impacted, for a while, for some time to come, or for a couple of years to come, before we can see recovery in them.
Lokendra, please.
Hello, ma'am. So I have three questions. First, now RBI governor made a statement that this is a three-speed recovery rather than a K-shaped one, and it makes sense also because in K-shape you see one part is declining, right? But actually it's not declining. The speed of recovery is variable. So one sector is recovering fast and one sector is recovering slow. The line goes up only. So do you think the three-speed recovery phrase makes more sense for India than the K-shape? Second is, what do you think economic recovery means for the gig economy that is taking shape in India? Like, how do you foresee it? And do you think that the people who are in billionaires who are in hospitality, tourism, airlines will now diversify and also move towards those sectors which are doing well? And lastly, if you look at historically, like as an economist, you look at historically, do you think this is going to change the labor capital relationship in the long term?
Okay, I didn't get the second part of your question. What was the second part?
Second part was the gig economy. What do you think will be gig economy, like the Ola, Uber thing, Swiggy
Okay.
thing? And do you think that the billionaires who are involved in hospitality, tourism, airlines, which are suffering now, they'll diversify? We'll see a lot of diversification happening.
See, as far as the RBI governor's three-speed recovery is concerned, it is another way of, as I said, remember that K is not a theoretical concept. So I don't think many economists will work and, kind of actually put it out as characterizing recovery like that, but you'll see a lot of talk around K curve because, everybody is very, very kind of we are all trying to grapple with the developments of this pandemic. Nobody anticipated, even in India, even in Delhi, for example, when we went through the lockdown on March 21st, nobody anticipated that we are going to be under lockdown for, this next 6 months to come. Everybody thought this was going to be 3 weeks. So, the developments have happened and people are coming to, kind of trying to make sense out of it. And in that process, the K has emerged, and K is more a talking concept, a talking term, rather than, as I said, any theoretical foundations, in terms of proportions, in terms of sectors, etc. But as far as the three-speed recovery is concerned, if you try and understand, that's only another way of stating, you see, that different sectors of the economy are going to recover at different speeds, or at different time points. So it may be possible that some are recovered, as far as e-commerce is concerned, for example, I would say there has been no dip as far as e-commerce is concerned. It's only risen during this time. So some sectors have not even experienced a dip. They've actually experienced a rise throughout the pandemic, But some sectors, on the other hand, have seen a dip. And some sectors, as I said, for example, travel, tourism, hospitality, will take a very long time to come back to their original. So the speed is naturally going to be different. And the different speed across the economy is a consequence of the fact that different sectors are impacted differently. So it's ultimately, you're putting it more concrete economic terms, in more concrete, let me say, policy terminology, to say that it's going to be a differentiated in terms of speed of recovery. But let's not say that K is what is happening in every economy. But you also must remember, that K also has another implication, which is in terms of rising inequalities within economies. We can't deny, that there are some who are on the rise, and there is a gradual recovery for some. But there are some, for example, who've gone back home, gone back to villages where there are not necessarily employment opportunities awaiting them. They may not have been able to get any employment. So there are certain sections of the people who moved from some income to no income at all. And so this rising inequality, which is also one implication of the K curve, or which is also one part of the K curve, that is not something that's going to happen in the sense of correction very quickly either. In fact, there is a lot of talk, that's happening, and a lot of discussion that's happening around the fact that, regions like South Asia, for example, countries like India, which have experienced in the last decade or so, you kind of experienced the crossing over as far as the poverty line is concerned of large sections of the population, And now we're going to see a setback to that progress that South Asia has made, or India has made essentially, which is in terms of reducing inequality or poverty, So that reduction in poverty that we had experienced, many of those gains are going to be reversed now in this process. Inequality is therefore bound to rise. There are some sections, therefore, which may not see recovery at all immediately. Ultimately, the K curve, Yes, but three-speed recovery makes better sense. It's better in terms of policy communication that you do, And you have to be more concrete sitting at the head of the central bank. You've got to talk in terms of those, which are more economic drawn or theoretically drawn, let's say, or which make better sense as far as policy is concerned, to say that sectors are going to recover at different speeds and policy is going to respond to these speed differentiations accordingly, Hence, what we see in terms of stimulus measures from the government, or even as far as monetary policy, etc., is concerned, is in response to this differentiated recovery as far as the economy is concerned. Two, as far as the gig economy is concerned, I think I'm not kind of really, in the sense of detailed study of this, but I think I had the Uber head the other day. I think I read about that, saying that the business is doing better than before as far as India is concerned. I think there is going to be, my own reading of the situation is that it's going to be a little difficult as far as this sector is concerned. Again, because many people, at least for some time to come, are going to prefer using personal vehicles, That is why, again, something that had not been envisioned at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody thought, that the pandemic is going to see decline as far as fuel consumption is concerned, which has been very significant, by the way, but aviation fuel, But more and more people have come out and started to use private vehicles, so that what we originally saw as automobiles going to have a huge hit, both because of supply chain disruption, as well as people working from home. In fact, has, kind of been among the first few sectors to pick up, because automobile buying, a lot of people are buying, getting, in the sense of even secondhand cars or whatever, because it's personally driven and personal vehicles, you see, that has picked up, So automobiles are back on the recovery path, except that the supply chain disruption that continues to be so, that's one part of it. And the other part, as far as what the last one was in terms of the historical capital to labor proportions or changes, will we have more in terms of, I think, would you imply that, are you trying to say that there is going to be greater capital consumption or capital employment as vis-a-vis labor? I think increasingly what we are moving towards as against capital labor ratio changes is in terms of increasing inclusion of technology in production, the big component changes or the big, composition changes as far as production is going to be concerned is going to be in terms of inclusion of artificial intelligence, robotic intelligence, and technology as far as production is concerned. So capital intensity in terms of greater capital expenditure on these aspects, yes, but knowledge intensity, R&D intensity, AI, robotic involvement, I think those are the components that are really going to be on the rise, whether we talk about supply chains or we talk about production individually in individual countries.
Thank you. One last question, Saurina.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Batra, my question is with regard to the kind of recovery that you would foresee in South Asia, especially with regard to Bangladesh. Like when we talk about growth, Bangladesh's growth has been accredited to the garment industry. But keeping in mind the lockdown and how the garment industry has been shut down for a considerable months, and also your point on how technology is going to be increasingly used in different sectors, how do you foresee what kind of recovery do you foresee for Bangladesh, especially in the garment sector?
Well, if you've seen the latest numbers, then we all know that Bangladesh is going to outdo the entire South Asian region this time, Bangladesh is I think, the only country that is actually going to post a positive rate of growth in South Asia, So I think Bangladesh is among the first to recover. Yes, as far as orders for, as far as RMG is concerned, ready-made garments are concerned, that's the primary sector for Bangladesh. The growth in Bangladesh has, in a way, drawn from this particular sector in the past. But you must also remember, I think someone had the billionaire diversifying into other production. A lot of production as far as textiles is concerned, textiles producers are concerned, have diversified into PP production, for example, so there is a lot of them have diversified into production of masks, for example, large scale mask production, that's happening. So there is a lot of diversification that's happening. But as far as Bangladesh, coming back to that is concerned, there was, in the sense, I think about 2 months back, we had a seminar with the Bangladesh traders, and the Bangladesh chambers, where it was very clearly stated that they actually have a lot of their garment orders coming back, So yes, it's a function of the ready-made garments. The sector has been hit because of demand internationally. Their markets are basically developed markets, in particular the European markets, But what we are going to see across the world, again, is going to be diversification, which is going to, in the sense of a lot of clothing chains that are going to diversify into other aspects. We have to understand, if people have stopped buying, formal clothes, then there is increased demand for leisure wear, as what is being called as lounge wear, If you look at the websites, clothing websites across the world, you will increasingly see quick shifts, whether it's the Marks and Spencers or whether it's the Zaras of the world, there is a quick shift to loungewear and leisure wear, So there is a movement in terms of studying the consumption patterns. It's, as I said, the underlying bit is in terms of the K curve. There is a section of the society, there is a section of the economy that is doing well. Consumption has not, it's not like consumption has closed down completely. A certain nature of consumption has declined, but some kind of consumption has gone up. As I said, if you're sitting at home, there is a greater people working from home. There is a greater demand for office, furniture that can be used at home. You're wanting home furniture. I've known people, who bought tables, chairs because they're sitting for meetings for 4 hours at a stretch. Greater buying of computers, bigger screens that people are buying. The other day I was in a CII meeting, when it was very clearly stated, that people are buying bigger screens. We thought people are only going to buy washing machines because no maids, etc. But the entertainment at home sector, because you're spending more time on Netflix and so on, so you want bigger screens to entertain you. You can't go to theaters now, So you see the consumption pattern of those who can afford is also making possible diversification in different sectors, which is going to imply, that yes, the normal as far as RMG that was being produced in Bangladesh may not be there, but orders for a different variety may be flowing in. This is what we were clearly told, that many orders are coming back to Bangladesh. And Bangladesh's recovery has also been a consequence, as we know. I think India is the most impacted as far as the pandemic is concerned, in terms of confirmed cases as well as number of deaths. And that is more also because we are a larger population, larger area, diverse in terms of regions, and therefore, the impact is much greater. It's more difficult to grapple with. But Bangladesh, also with a very high density of population, has done very well as far as the pandemic is concerned. And they're already on the path of recovery. As I said, the only country that's going to see a good positive growth in South Asia. So the recovery is already there, and kind of on paper, it's already expected that they are recovering.
Amita, can you take one more question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Rashmi, please.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I have one question with regards to the nature of recovery. So, talking about Schumpeter's concept of innovation after creative destruction, COVID seems to be challenging a lot of existing models, right? Forcing us to innovate and adapt. So, will this innovation continue playing out? Even after COVID-19 or during the recovery, or if yes, how do we perceive economics and the institutions or economic thought process while we adapt to these new changes?
Okay, starting with the last, I'm not sure economic thought processes, how that's going to change. But yes, as I said earlier, it is artificial intelligence, robotics, technology, R&D, that's going to be the core of production processes in future. For every large corporation, as I think I said this last time too, profitability is the underlying motivation for production, and they've got to maintain that. No good large corporation is going to continue to sit and watch the pandemic and, kind of sit idle, not giving into thought and otherwise. So thinking and innovation both in the manner in which you think, as I said, individual consumption is changing. And what we thought in the beginning, that it was only going to be household stuff that was going to sell, has changed to many other kinds of commodities that are on the demand today, And so as the pandemic develops, in the sense as it kind of evolves, continues to evolve, none of us is actually looking at the end as of now, We're only hoping that there is going to be a vaccine. Vaccine by itself, if you see the speed of, research and development, scientific involvement as far as the pandemic is concerned, the vaccine is concerned, is huge in that sense, The manner in which what takes a period of 10 years, this time is, we are trying to do it in a year or two, And that involves both the, the second part of your question, it involves technology, as well as it involves institutional changes, because there are regulatory changes that are being brought in, to hasten the process of approvals as far as the vaccine is concerned across the world, So you're thinking of new ways on how to kind of do this. There are new ways of cooperation that are happening across the world. While we talk about, for example, if you say economic thinking, we've been talking about economic nationalization, deglobalization in the last few years, and we also think, that pandemic is going to lead to economic deglobalization, because more and more people want to, at least it started with restriction on exports, no travel, border closures, etc. Also in terms of not allowing, putting restrictions on export of food grains, essential commodities, pharmaceuticals. It started with that. But then there is greater cooperation that's required also in terms of sharing technology now. So institutions also have to reform accordingly in terms of fitting in with or responding to the needs that are arising out of the pandemic. There's been a recent agreement as far as India and I think Africa is concerned in terms of sharing the vaccine technology. How is it that, I mean, as everybody is saying, that we need India and China to pitch in, large countries with large populations, to scale up production, of the vaccine. So cooperation is also going to take another form, and therefore institutions, whether it be the World Trade Organization, whether it be in that terms the World Health Organization, whether it be in terms of the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, because we need necessary changes as far as intellectual property rights are concerned when we're sharing technology for the vaccine. There was initially the talk about that there should be no there should be no vaccine nationalism, But we're looking at now how cooperation in terms of scale, sharing of technology is becoming more and more important, because it's not like if I'm okay, everything is going to be fine. You also have to be, okay for me to survive this okay period, because this is a contagious disease. The element of contagion and the element of infection here is so rapid and so huge that everybody has to have the vaccine. And therefore, how do you expect that to happen? It's going to be cooperation. So global and international organizations will therefore have to change accordingly. And economic thinking will also have to change accordingly in terms of incorporating these aspects. I don't think that, the concept of what we started with in terms of deglobalization, etc., it's really going to work. It's a change in the nature of work, Similarly, I mean, just as a last bit, a lot of talk that happened to begin with in terms of how supply chains would get disrupted, and people would start, large corporations would start to shift away from China. Really? Not necessarily, They are actually going to find new ways of using technology to, what many were thinking that just in time bit, as far as supply chains were concerned, is not going to work anymore. That may not work, but you want alternatives more in terms of technology than in terms of high cost spending or building warehouses everywhere in the world. So a lot of things will change, but a lot of things are actually at this point of time still, kind of, getting revealed. We don't have everything in front of us as yet, but yes, things will change. Things are changing, but some things, as you yourself were saying, Schumpeter, I mean, talked about all these things a long time back, so that's still applicable, in terms of creative destruction. Many sectors will end up, many, will just close, will never see the light of the day again, but newer ones will emerge. That's always there, So that creative destruction continues to apply. Innovation will be a major segment of that. And well, we hope we soon see to, we will soon see the end of the pandemic, and all of us will once have the opportunity to talk to each other face to face, rather than on screens. I mean, look at the kind of change that we've seen. Everybody talking on screens, things going on, So how technology makes possible many things has been, I think, one core lesson of the pandemic, and that will continue.
Thank you. Amita, thank you so much from the on behalf of our class for spending this morning with us. Especially, this is a technical issue. We talk about global politics and contemporary world affairs, but issues like this, we need an extra hand. Thanks for that 45 minutes with us. And I sincerely hope that you will find some time in the future when we have few more questions to trouble you, Amita. And
Anytime.
as you told at the end, this does not, whatever may happen in the next couple of months is, the promise that we have made to you, that you should come here for a day or two, spend some time with us so that you can meet some of the other scholars and Nias also. So I hope it works soon. Let's not stick to only speaking here over screen. Thank you, Amita, for
Thank you
spending.
so much. Thank you. And you're always welcome. I am always happy to talk to students otherwise. So anytime that you need a helping hand, as you said, if I can be of any value to the group, I'd be happy to do that. And yes, I do hope that someday I'll be able to make it, to physically interact with